Picture this, a crisp, quiet morning in your backyard. The dew is still clinging to the blades of grass and the pale gold light of dawn is just beginning to warm the wooden panels of your fence. Hanging right there, suspended from the sturdy branch of an old oak tree, sits your brand new bird feeder. It's filled to the brim with premium, expensive mixed seed. You spent an hour choosing the right blend, scrubbing the plastic clean, and positioning it right where you can watch from your kitchen window while you sip your morning coffee. But as the hours tick by, something strange happens. The air is completely silent. A lone house sparrow flits past, catches sight of the feeder, stalls midair with a sharp flap of its wings, and veers violently away, vanishing into the neighbor's hedge. No cardinals, no chickadees, no goldfinches. Just an empty plastic tube swinging gently in the morning breeze. You did everything right. So why does every bird in your neighborhood treat your yard like a ghost town? Most people assume that attracting wild birds is simply a matter of economics and real estate. Put out enough food, make it look appetizing, hang it in a prominent tree, and they will come. It is an intuitive assumption, rooted in the human logic of a restaurant or a convenience store. If you build a buffet, the diners will naturally arrive. But nature operates on an entirely different operating system, one governed by millions of years of evolutionary survival instincts that completely override the simple desire for a free meal. What most backyard bird enthusiasts fail to realize is that a bird feeder is not perceived by local wildlife as a generous gift. To a small songbird weighing less than an ounce, whose life is a constant, razor-thin margin between survival and sudden death, your shiny plastic or wooden feeder looks less like a diner and more like a tactical execution ground. Beneath the surface of your peaceful garden, an invisible psychological war is being waged every single second. Birds do not think like humans. When a chickadee or a titmouse approaches your yard, it isn't scanning for the highest quality sunflower seeds. It is scanning for exobroughs, death traps, predator silhouettes, and acoustic blind spots. Every single design choice of your feeder, every shadow it casts, every scent molecule lingering on its plastic ports, and every sonic frequency vibrating through your yard is quietly screaming a single word to passing flocks: danger. And the most fascinating part? The very things you are doing to try and help them, the neat placement, the heavy filling, the open view, are the exact things driving them away. It is heartbreaking to look out at a silent yard day after day, wondering if you are doing something wrong, or worse, if the local bird population is simply vanishing. You bought that feeder because you wanted a connection to the wild, a small window of vibrant life, dazzling color, and pure, unfiltered nature right outside your glass. You wanted to feel that quiet joy of watching a tiny creature trust your space enough to feed. When your yard stays empty, it feels like a quiet rejection, a subtle failure in your stewardship of the natural world. But that is about to change. Over the next few minutes, we are going to strip away the human assumptions of backyard birding and look directly through the eyes and the ancient, hardwired psychology of the birds themselves. We are going to expose the hidden traps, the sensory tripwires, and the structural nightmares that are turning your sanctuary into an exclusion zone. Once you see your yard through their perspective, everything will snap into focus. You will finally understand the invisible forces at play, and you will learn how to transform your silent garden into a vibrant, bustling ecosystem overnight. Before we pull back the curtain on the hidden mechanics of the avian world, take a brief moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We dive deep into the hidden layers of everyday life, uncovering the science and psychology that most people completely miss. Join our community of curious minds, and let's decode the world together. To understand why your garden is quiet, we must first step inside the mind of a creature whose heart beats up to 1,200 times a minute. A songbird lives in a state of hypervigilance that human beings can scarcely comprehend. Every second of their day is an exhausting calculus of risk versus reward. When a bird evaluates a food source, it does not look at the food. It looks at the geometry of the space surrounding it. Consider the classic, widely popular tube feeder hanging right in the middle of an open lawn or suspended from a single branch in the center of a yard. To our human eyes, this looks ideal. It is visible, accessible, and unobstructed. But to a small titmouse or finch, that open space is a localized nightmare. Let's break down the sensory experience of a bird approaching that feeder. Imagine yourself standing in the exact center of a massive, wide-open concrete parking lot. There are no walls, no pillars, no doorways, and no places to hide. Overhead, the vast open sky stretches in every direction. Now imagine someone places a table of delicious food right in the middle of that parking lot. Would you walk out there unprotected? Or would your skin prickle with the primal instinct that you are completely exposed to anything descending from the sky? This is precisely what a bird experiences when faced with an open-hanging feeder. Hawks, falcons, and domestic cats do not attack from underground. They strike from the sky or from hidden perches above. By placing a feeder out in the open, you have inadvertently engineered a high-risk predation zone. When a bird lands on that perch, its body is locked into a fixed position. Its focus is entirely directed downward toward the seed port. Its beak is occupied, and its field of vision is severely restricted by the plastic tube or wire cage surrounding it. The sound of the wind rushing past its feathers is muffled by the structure itself. The rustle of a nearby leaf, which should signal a shifting breeze, becomes a terrifying acoustic question mark. Can it hear the sharp, silent drop of an approaching Cooper's hawk? In that split second of vulnerability, the bird's neurochemistry floods with panic hormones. Corticosterone surges through its tiny bloodstream, triggering an immediate, involuntary freeze response. It aborts the landing, banks hard, and flies away. This is the predator illusion in action. Your feeder isn't failing because the seed is stale or the weather is wrong. It is failing because its very placement mimics the textbook hunting grounds of avian raptors. Every time a bird looks at your setup, its ancient survival programming screams that stopping to eat there is a fatal mistake. To fix this, you have to understand how birds utilize what biologists call escape cover. A safe feeding station is never an island, it is an outpost. Birds require a dense, protective thicket, shrubbery, or dense branching structure located precisely within a short, explosive burst of flight, usually no more than 6 to 8 feet away. They need to know that if a shadow crosses the sun, they can vanish into safety in a fraction of a second. When you move that feeder closer to the protective safety of natural cover, the psychological shift is instantaneous. The illusion of vulnerability shatters, replaced by the comforting geometry of a secure sanctuary. While visual cues dictate where a bird will look, sound dictates whether it will stay. We tend to think of our gardens as quiet, peaceful refuges, especially on a calm afternoon, but our human ears are profoundly desensitized to the microscopic layers of sound that fill the natural world. If you were to strap a directional acoustic sensor to the branch of your backyard tree, you would realize that your garden is bathed in a relentless throbbing wall of low-frequency and high-frequency noise that is entirely invisible to your daily awareness. Consider the modern suburban or semi-rural garden. It is surrounded by an invisible humming orchestra of technological artifacts. The low-frequency rumble of a neighbor's air conditioning unit vibrating through the soil. The high-frequency electronic whine of an ultrasonic pest repeller tucked into a flower bed. The constant pulsing drone of distant highway traffic, the sharp metallic snap of a screen door closing 3 houses down. To a human being, these are background noises that easily fade into white noise. To a songbird whose auditory system is exquisitely evolved to detect the subtlest rustle of an insect under bark or the high-pitched alarm call of a conspecific, these sounds are deafening, erratic, and deeply threatening. Let's look at a specific real-world example. The placement of feeders near human infrastructure. Many homeowners mount their feeders directly outside a kitchen window, on a deck railing, or right next to an exterior wall. It feels convenient for us. We get a front row seat to the action while we wash dishes or drink tea. But walk over to that window and place your ear against the glass. Notice the low-frequency thrum of the refrigerator, the hum of the HVAC system, the vibration of voices carrying through the wall. To a bird landing on that deck railing, that wall is not a solid boundary. It is a giant speaker cone broadcasting erratic, unpredictable vibrations. Birds rely heavily on acoustic monitoring to detect danger. When wind hits a solid structure like a house wall or a deck post, it creates invisible swirling vortexes of turbulent wind noise that sounds to an avian ear remarkably like the wing beats of a diving predator or the chaotic rush of air through a stormy canopy. Furthermore, high-frequency technological noise such as the digital chirps of motion-activated security lights, invisible electronic pest deterrents, or even the subtle electrical hum of outdoor lighting, transformers operates in the exact frequency range that songbirds use for social communication and alarm signaling. When a feeder is placed within the acoustic shadow of these devices, the birds experience continuous sensory interference. They cannot hear the warning calls of other birds. They cannot accurately gauge the distance of ambient sounds. The result is a phenomenon known as acoustic masking. The bird feels chronically disoriented and stressed. It might fly in, grab a single seed with frantic haste, and bolt, refusing to linger, sing, or bring its mate. Over time, word spreads through the local avian network. Yes, birds communicate complex spatial maps to one another through vocalizations and behavioral tracking. When a specific territory is marked by chronic acoustic unpredictability and sensory distortion, it gets blacklisted. The flock simply routes around your yard, choosing quieter, acoustically stable trees 2 streets over, completely unaware of the expensive seed waiting in your silent, humming feeder. If a bird manages to conquer its visual fears and block out the acoustic chaos of your yard, it faces one final, microscopic hurdle before it ever touches a seed: chemistry. We often forget that birds possess an extraordinarily sophisticated sensory apparatus that goes far beyond what we can see or smell. While songbirds are not typically known for a powerful sense of smell in the mammalian sense, they are hypersensitive to chemical signatures, volatile organic compounds, and organic decay markers that signal disease and death. Let's walk through what happens to a standard plastic or wooden bird feeder over the course of a humid summer week. Rain falls, humidity rises, and moisture becomes trapped inside the enclosed seed reservoirs and feeding ports. Within hours, microscopic mold spores, specifically Aspergillus species and various forms of toxic fungi, begin to colonize the damp crevices of the feeder. To the human eye, the seed inside might look mostly fine, perhaps a little dusty at the bottom. But on a microscopic level, a toxic bloom is underway. When a bird lands on a contaminated port, its beak comes into direct contact with invisible fungal biofilms. More importantly, birds are acutely sensitive to the chemical byproduct of decaying organic matter, specifically mycotoxins and rancid oils released by old, oxidized seeds. Long before a bird ingests enough to become visibly sick, its chemoreceptors detect the subtle, pungent chemical signature of rot. In the wild, rotting food is universally synonymous with disease, contamination, and death. Avian evolution has zero tolerance for spoiled provisions. When a bird encounters the faint, invisible chemical ghost trail of mold or bacterial buildup on a feeder port, an immediate aversion response is triggered. It is an automatic biological rejection. But there is another chemical factor that most people never consider: human residue. Think about how you refill your feeder. You pick up the heavy plastic container, unscrew the top with your bare hands, scoop out the seed, and handle the perches. In doing so, you leave behind an invisible, potent cocktail of human skin oils, sweat, microscopic salts, and, depending on what you handled beforehand, scents from soaps, lotions, insect repellents, or gasoline. To a woodland creature, human scent is not a neutral backdrop. It is the premier apex predator signature. Humans are large bipedal omnivores who historically raided nests, disturbed roosts, and hunted small game. When you coat the perches and opening ports of a bird feeder in your personal chemical signature, you are essentially smearing the equivalent of predator musk all over the front door of the restaurant. The bird lands. Its microscopic tactile and chemical receptors register the foreign organic oils, and its brain instantly registers: an apex predator was just here. The panic is absolute. It doesn't matter that you mean well. It doesn't matter that you wash your hands sometimes. The chemical footprint remains, lingering on the porous plastic or unsealed wood for days. To break this invisible barrier, feeders require a level of deep sanitization that goes far beyond a quick rinse under the garden hose. They demand dismantling, scrubbing with non-toxic enzymatic cleaners, complete drying to halt mold germination, and the conscious minimization of direct hand contact with high-touch perches, or better yet, switching to materials like stainless steel and glass that do not absorb and hold human and organic chemical signatures the way degraded plastics and untreated woods do. If you have solved the visual puzzle, quieted the acoustic space, and sterilized your feeder of chemical ghosts, yet your yard remains stubbornly empty, you may be running into a far more complex social barrier, the neighborhood mafia. We tend to view backyard birds as a harmonious, gentle chorus of colorful neighbors living in peaceful coexistence. The reality of avian social dynamics is much closer to a gritty, high-stakes turf war governed by strict dominance hierarchies, territorial exclusion, and organized mobbing behavior. Let's examine what happens when a single, aggressive, highly adaptable species establishes dominance over your yard. Think of birds like house sparrows, European starlings, or even overly territorial blue jays and mockingbirds. These species do not merely feed alongside other birds, they colonize. They operate with a mafia-like cartel mentality. When a dominant flock discovers a rich, concentrated calorie source like your feeder, they immediately recognize its strategic value. Instead of sharing, they establish an exclusive perimeter. They set up watch posts on nearby branches, fence lines, and roof ridges. When a smaller, more timid migratory visitor, such as a delicate warbler, a goldfinch, or a downy woodpecker approaches the airspace, the territorial bullies do not simply ignore them. They launch coordinated, aggressive interception flights. They dive bomb, scream alarm calls, and harass the newcomer until it is driven entirely out of the territory. This creates what behavior ecologists call an exclusion zone, but the psychological impact goes even deeper than direct physical combat. Birds communicate danger and territory ownership through specific, highly codified vocalizations. When a dominant flock engages in territorial defense around a feeder, their aggressive calls echo through the local canopy, broadcasting a clear message to every other bird within a quarter-mile radius. This zone is occupied, hostile, and dangerous. Migratory songbirds passing through your neighborhood are constantly listening for these acoustic territorial markers. If every time a flock approaches your yard, they hear the chaotic, aggressive mobbing calls of starlings or sparrows fighting over your feeder, their cost-benefit analysis changes instantly. Why risk entering a hostile, high-conflict zone where energy must be wasted fighting local thugs just to get a seed, when calmer, unclaimed natural foraging grounds exist 20 yards away in the wild brush? Furthermore, certain aggressive species produce defensive droppings and chemical residues around the feeding station that actively deter other species. The sheer density of waste left by a flock of 50 invasive house sparrows creates a heavily fouled local environment that sensitive native birds instinctively avoid due to disease risk. To break this mafia dynamic, you cannot simply add more seed that only feeds the cartel and encourages them to multiply their numbers. You have to disrupt their monopoly through structural and spatial interventions. This means altering the physical geometry of the feeding station so that bulk-feeding bullies cannot physically access it, such as using weight-activated perches that collapse under the heavy weight of a starling or pigeon while easily supporting a light chickadee. It means diversifying your offerings so that different species feed at different heights and times, breaking the centralized hub-and-spoke monopoly that allows a single aggressive species to control the entire caloric flow of your garden. Even when the social dynamics are balanced and the chemical coast is clear, there is one final mechanical hurdle that stops birds in their tracks: the fatal geometry of commercial feeder design. We live in a world where mass-produced garden accessories are designed by industrial designers sitting in office buildings, focused entirely on aesthetic appeal, manufacturing cost efficiency, and shipping dimensions. What they almost never understand is the complex, finely tuned biomechanics of an avian body in motion. Let's look closely at how a bird lands. A songbird is an aerodynamic marvel. Its entire body is optimized for weight reduction, explosive acceleration, and high-speed precision landing. When a bird approaches a perch, it does not simply fly straight at it and stop. It executes a complex, high-speed stall maneuver, pitching its tail feathers downward to act as an air brake, extending its legs forward and gripping the perch with an involuntary, tendon-locked grasp that tightens the moment its toes wrap around a branch. Now, look at the perches on your standard commercial bird feeder. They are typically short, rigid, perfectly smooth plastic or metal cylinders protruding at a rigid 90-degree angle from a flat or cylindrical surface. There is no give, no natural flex, and no textural variation. To a bird executing a high-speed landing approach, a rigid, slick plastic perch is an aerodynamic trap. If the wind catches the bird slightly off-center as it approaches, its feet hit that smooth plastic peg without traction. Instead of a secure grip, its claws slip. In a fraction of a second, the bird is thrown off balance, its wing clips the edge of the feeder port, and it suffers a mid-air collision panic. Think about how terrifying that is for a prey animal. A sudden loss of control in midair is the universal signature of a physical strike, a collision with a window, or a failed evasion from a predator. The bird recovers its flight path with a frantic adrenaline-fueled flap, circles away and registers that specific object in its spatial memory as physically hazardous. It will never attempt to land on that specific perch design again. Moreover, consider the spacing geometry of modern multi-port feeders. Many designs place feeding ports mere inches apart in neat geometric rows. To human eyes, this looks efficient like multiple checkout lanes at a store. But to a bird, packing multiple feeding individuals into tight, uncomfortably close proximity violates their individual flight distance bubbles. When a bird is eating, its head is down, its wings are slightly drooped for balance, and its peripheral vision is compromised. If another bird lands within 3 inches of its flank, it triggers an instant claustrophobic panic response. The birds end up bickering, blocking each other's escape routes, and creating a chaotic traffic jam that feels unsafe. Natural feeding sites, like the swaying head of a tall sunflower, the rough bark of an oak trunk, or the tangled branches of a berry bush, offer compliant, flexible geometry. They move with the wind. They provide variable grip surfaces. They allow for multiple approach angles and instant, unobstructed escape vectors in 360 degrees. When you replace rigid, sterile plastic tubes with natural branch perches, staggered feeding platforms, and generous spatial separation between ports, the entire physical dynamic shifts. The landing nightmare dissolves. The bird approaches, hits a compliant, familiar surface, secures an instant, slip-free grip, and feeds in calm, uninterrupted peace. We have journeyed through the hidden layers of the avian world, from the terrifying optical illusion of open spaces and the invisible wall of acoustic chaos, through the ghost trails of chemical decay and the brutal territorial politics of the neighborhood cartel, down to the subtle mechanical failures of industrial perch geometry. You now see what birds see when they look at your backyard. You realize that transforming a silent, empty garden into a vibrant, thriving sanctuary is not about buying more expensive seed or placing a plastic tube in the most visible spot on your lawn. It is about an absolute paradigm shift. It requires stepping out of your human ego and learning to think like a hunted, hyper-vigilant, sensory-driven wild creature. Every single element we have discussed is interconnected. When you fix the placement, you alter the acoustic shadows. When you sterilize the materials, you erase the predator scent markers. When you redesign the landing geometry, you dismantle the trap, and as you begin to adjust these hidden variables one by one, something remarkable happens. The local avian networks take notice. The scouting chickadee finds a safe approach route with immediate escape cover. It lands on a compliant, natural textured perch with zero mechanical slip. It tastes clean, uncontaminated seed free of human chemical residue. It hears no deafening sonic distortion from technological hums. It feeds in peace, finishes its meal, and launches back into the sky. And then it tells the others. Suddenly, one quiet Tuesday morning, you look out your kitchen window and the entire paradigm shifts before your very eyes. The silence is broken. A flash of brilliant electric yellow streaks through the morning mist. A goldfinch lands effortlessly on a natural branch perch, completely unbothered, its body relaxed and secure. Within seconds, a pair of titmice drop down from the dense cover of the nearby cedar hedge, slipping into the feeding zone with fluid, silent grace. A downy woodpecker clings to the bark of the support post, tapping rhythmically without a trace of hesitation. The ghost town is gone. In its place stands a thriving, pulsing ecosystem of wildlife, operating right outside your window in perfect, harmonious synchronization with the natural world, all because you finally stopped treating your yard like a human convenience store and started designing it as a wild sanctuary. You started this journey looking at a silent, swinging plastic tube hanging in the empty air of a quiet backyard, wondering why nature refused to visit. Now, standing by that same window, you see the invisible threads that connect the earth, the sky, the wind, and the ancient instincts of every wing that beats above your lawn. You haven't just put out food. You have learned to speak the silent, complex language of the wild. What is the single biggest mistake you notice birds making in your yard? Let me know in the comments below.